Good morning, Bruce.
Well, hello there.
So welcome to the Ninos Community Garden. Here we are.
I have been here once before, but I would never saw it when I think it was the winter, so I never saw it so active.
It's really there. We've got quite a number of neighborhood and neighbor garden plots. Maybe we should just take a walk in the garden. What do you think?
Sure.
All right.
I'm gonna take my morning tea with me.
And I'll follow you.
Wow. Okay. Well, first, I want to say I wish I lived closer to here so I could have a plot, because I am out of room. My front yard has become my vegetable garden. And my life's goal coming from the north was growing melons, which in New York, you really could do if you're really, really good. But the answer is I never was successful. So I see this wasted area here and I say, geez, think of all the honeydew melons I could grow here. But alas, it is not to be.
It is not. Well, maybe in your own community, nearer to your home.
Yeah.
But here we're in South Natomas. We're just off of El Camino at North Field. And here's a little field. So
These look like melons or squash. I think they're melons, or maybe winter squash. But they definitely have the melon look to the leaves, which are the small. Squash generally have big leaves. Melons usually have smaller, rounder leaves, and squash flowers are those big orange flowers, which you can cook, by the way. So if you get your male squash flowers, you can actually cook those. I don't know how to do it, but they fry them, I believe.
Huh.
And I think it's an Italian thing. And then, of course, the melons have small yellow flowers, so they're not really cookable. But these aren't flowering yet. So
no flowers yet.
I don't think so.
But there's a whole, somebody has got a whole 20 by 20 foot.
And here is, yes, these look like melons because if you can see this really closely, that's the seed coat.
Okay, let me zoom in a little closer, Bruce.
So that's a seed coat, and that definitely looks like a melon seed. So this person is fulfilling my life's dream of having a melon patch.
Maybe you could come back and become friends with them.
Yes, and if not friends, then at least I'll come around 1 a.m. and steal some melons while they're not working. Because that is my other life dream, to be a melon thief.
Wow, there's not a really good goal. Oh, look at how beautiful.
These are asters. I don't know which type, but
Mary Astor.
Mary Astor, yes, she lives on Astor Place in New York. But anyway, there's back east we have what we call New England asters and New York asters, and they sort of look alike. But there they bloom in the late summer. It's sort of a sign that summer is soon ending. Whereas here, blooming seasons are very weird here. That you'll have plants that bloom there in the fall. Here, my mums are already starting to bloom, and I'll have to cut them back again. So it's sort of weird. And of course, sunflowers, which are fun.
So I just let one of our guests in, and I'm going to just go ahead and look at, there's Sarah. So I can see, I'm going to just say hello to Sarah.
Hello.
And she's on mute, and she's on
Unmute.
You are, yes, I thank you, dear.
We just heard her tell us that she's on mute.
I just unmuted me.
You did. And you have your little video turned off, which is fine.
Nope.
Whatever you would like is
Here I am.
all good for us.
Yeah.
There you are.
Right.
Lovely to see you. And so
You
and
too.
you can see our video. Yes.
Yes, I can. Where is this garden, Teresa?
This garden is called the Ninos Community Garden. And I'll just take a little walk or turn around here. So this is just off of El Camino, between North Gate and Truxell are the two big main streets. I
know where it is then. Do you remember Marion Ono? Did you know her at the Y? Anyway,
yes, as a matter of fact, yes.
She lives not far from here, from the garden.
Ah.
Yeah,
We should tell her about this.
I
And
will.
you remember Bruce from last month?
I do. I do.
And Bruce is hosting today.
Yeah.
We're just taking a look at this garden because so many people don't know that it's here. And here is some neighbor has their plot. The plots are 20 by 20.
That's pretty
Yeah.
big.
And yeah, it is really, and they've got rows and rows of,
Nice size plot.
yeah, it's
20 by 20, or the size of a average New York City apartment. This is where you spend your entire life if you live in New York City.
hence here we are in California.
Yes, exactly. Why we no longer live in New York City. Well, let's just look at the corn.
Let's go look at corn.
Oh, let's stop and take a look at these.
Wow. That's amazing. That corn already.
Isn't that beautiful?
Onions are amazing.
Oh, look.
I'm an onion growing fan, and they are super easy to grow. Well, this guy's smart. He planted them around 6 inches apart. You can plant them 2 to 4 inches apart. And if you plant them 2 inches apart, you have to pull them as scallions every other one. Otherwise, your onions will be crowded. They're so easy. I have a whole onion patch in front of my house, and we don't buy onions except for like the very late winter because our fall winter onions have not formed yet. But now we're already picking onions from last year that I planted in December, and we won't be buying onions again for another 10 months. And we'll be the city supplying onions to the neighborhood.
So could you tell from this what they are? I mean, what brand or no?
I am so not an expert. There's yellow, white, and red. There are lots of varieties. The key to planting onions is that onions make bulbs depending on the length of the day. And there are short day onions, long day onions, and intermediate day onions. And we live sort of smack in the middle. And so if you plant long day onions, well, let's put it this way, for Sacramento, plant intermediate day onions. And if you plant the wrong types, you will not get bulbs. They won't form bulbs. I planted some this year from onion sets, which are little mini onion bulbs that you can buy in the fall. But apparently they were the wrong season type. And so I didn't get bulbs. I got really thick scallions, but I never made bulbs.
I got those.
Yeah.
And they taste good.
Yeah, fine. Yeah. So, in my totally anachronistic jokes, they were scallions. They were supposed to be onions, and we cooked them like leeks. So SCA from scallions, N from onions, and KS from leeks. So we called them scallions.
No.
Totally inappropriate. But the reality was they were really good, and my friend made leek soup out of them.
All right.
We used them for Chinese cooking.
I made green onion pancakes.
There you go. Those are great. So this person's growing corn. What does that mean?
I don't know.
I'm not running on battery.
I don't know what that. I heard a noise too, but we're still just us.
Yeah, as long as if your battery runs out, we'll have to switch to mine.
No, that was my computer telling me an email had come in. I mean, an email had come in. That was the ding.
So
it's good to know.
We're into So corn is a grass. Yes, this is a grass.
Oh, it looks like a grass. I'm going to just walk around here.
And corn is wind pollinated, which means that when we've succeeded in killing all the bees, you will still be able to eat corn. I'm not suggesting you should kill the bees, but because corn is wind pollinated, the thing about corn is they'll probably get fine corn here, but you should plant corn in squares versus rows, because if you plant your corn in a row, it's more likely for the pollen to be blown away. The pollen are going to be those little tassel-y things you see at the top of the corn when they start to flower. The tassels will sort of drop down onto the silks of the corn cobs below. Again, there's none here now, and that's how it pollinates it. You can shake your corn plant when it's blooming, and that'll work too.
Shake your corn.
Shake your corn. But the thing is, if you plant them in rows, you notice the way the wind's going that way.
Yeah.
So the front ones will always get a little less pollination, but since it's in a row, there's a lot of the pollen is going to be blown away. But if this was in a square, then you get better pollination. So the more, the smaller the more compact the area you can grow your corn, the better. You still have to keep the plants at the right distance apart, but basically a square. If you grow them in a solitary row, you'll get very poor pollination generally.
Wow.
And you'll have to, again, do it yourself. If it's very windy,
Shaking your corn.
yeah. If the weather's still, it's not going to be an issue. But and you know, if you live in a windy area, this is a pretty windy area. A lot of the pollen could get blown away. I'm sure this person's going to get good corn though. But yeah, if they had planted
It's looking
square,
beautiful right now.
so you see, they put a row here, and they put a row there to sort of make a border. If they had put those rows next to each other, they'd probably get some better pollination. But the reality is, we'll find out, and then hopefully I'll be proved wrong in this case. But that's generally the rule of corn. Since it's wind pollinated, you want to plant it in a clump rather than in a row.
Good to know.
Corn down there too. I love corn. Corn. There's two things that can go wrong with corn. One is called corn smut. It's a disease, but the real issue that I've always had with corn is I would get caterpillars in my corn. And you know, I'm sure there's a product called Bacillus thuringiensis, which is a bacteria that if the caterpillars get in them, I think they stop eating, and so they'll die. And it's natural. It's not an insecticide, so it's safe to use.
And that's good to know. Is here in the Ninos community garden, you are not allowed to use any insecticide. The only natural products, because we are so close together. So all of these plots are, you know, adjacent to one another. And for example, this plot is not being used at all. No, you'll have to either endure that long 12-minute drive or move.
Well, you know, I'll think about this. And that's interesting because I rarely use insecticides in my backyard. I don't even spray for aphids. When I have an infestation, I typically just tolerate it because it's usually only on the roses. And typically there'll be a ladybug or two to come by and lay some eggs. And the ladybug larvae are amazing at taking care of aphids. I've had plants infested with aphids, then some ladybugs appeared, and then the aphids were gone. And as long as and again, it's the ladybug larvae that eat most of the aphids, not the ladybugs themselves. But
I wondered about that.
Yeah, ladybugs will eat them too, but the larvae, of course, are voracious because they need to grow. And yeah, I don't want my neighbors playing something that requires a period of days from spray to eating, because a lot of times you'll notice if you look at an insecticide, it'll say days to harvest. And for instance, I have as we all do, a Bermuda grass infestation. So I said, well, I can't get rid of it. And then I spray it. And then I was at the bottle. I said, yeah, you can spray on your vegetable gardens, your herbicides that kill grass. I'm not saying you should do this, but some of them require 30 days from the day of spraying till the day of harvest, which means if you're growing beans, and it's 15 days for beans. If you're growing beans and you spray, you can't eat the beans for 15 days. But within 15 days, those beans will be, you know, useless.
So you killed your entire harvest.
Right. It's not that the harvest is dead. It's just that you ruined your ability to harvest those beans. And if anyone grows beans or peas, you'll know that there's a very short period, like for pea pods, it's a very short period while the pea pod is edible before the peas form. And with beans, it's the same thing. There's a period where the beans are really delicious, and then the seeds start to get bigger. And before you know it, the bean is all stringy, which is one of the reasons they call them string beans. But more important is that, you know, if you spray on Monday and you can't eat them until 2 Mondays afterwards, yeah, what's the point of that? So that's another reason not to spray with herbicides or insecticides. Not so much, of course, the ecological issue, but even besides that, it's that if you can't eat your food for 2 weeks, you know,
what's the point?
Then your garden is like, you know, not being used for 2 weeks. I understand there are situations where you might have no choice, and that's what integrated pest management is all about. Integrated pest management is not necessarily completely organic, although they'd probably like to use organic pesticides. But the point of them, I guess I would say, I take it back. Integrated pest management does not mean that they're not going to use insecticides. It means they're going to use biological control as much as possible. And if it's a matter of losing your entire greenhouse or using an insecticide, you sort of have no choice. But again, it doesn't mean you use something like an insecticide that's going to kill every bug. You might spray just the areas with where the bugs are worse, and you might spray them with a insecticidal soap, which, while it may kill everything, it only kills what it touches. So, you know, that's a different issue. Marlene Simon, who is at the UC Davis Conservatory, says that they run their conservatory with integrated pest management, and I believe she says they haven't used pesticides at all in a long time. And again, when I say pesticides, I am including insecticidal soap. It's organic, it's safe, you can spray it on your tomato, wash it and eat it, as far as I understand, but it's still an insecticide, it's just completely organic. And I think we also, or pesticide, I think we need to understand that pesticide and insecticide is not a dirty word, but they have to be used properly. And again, you want to use the safest things possible, and soap and water, you know, that works too. But technically speaking, soap and water, when it's sprayed to kill insects, it's an insecticide. So just understand what you're spraying is more important than the word you use, to me.
Yeah, that's good.
You know,
So what else do you see here in the garden that we want to talk about today?
Well, I think I'd like to go look at these tomatoes.
I'm following you.
Everybody here has caged their tomatoes. Now, we like cage-free eggs, but what do we think of cage-free tomatoes? Well, tomatoes are really a lot easier to grow if they're in a cage, because of
that's what we've got right here. Yeah,
right. In this case, they have plum tomatoes here. We'll talk about that in a second. I'm growing dwarf tomatoes this year in my front yard, and cages aren't that pretty, especially in the front yard. So I've actually been staking them, and the reason I'm staking them is, number one, they're dwarf, so they're not going to go crazy all over the place, and number two, it does look a little nicer when when you don't have the plants all over the place. And frankly, this looks great, by the way.
That's what I thought.
These look fantastic. However, it is May, and these plants are already outgrowing the cage. Now, since we're talking about tomatoes, there's two types of tomato growth. There's what they call determinate and indeterminate. Determinate tomatoes grow only to a certain amount, and then they fruit, and then they die. And we'll go into that a bit later. Indeterminate tomatoes are the typical ones that just grow and grow. They'll go 7 feet, 8 feet, 10 feet. They'll grow all over the place. And determinate tomatoes, although officially they grow, fruit, and die, the reality is here in Sacramento, they just seem to keep growing anyway. So when you read determinate versus indeterminate, it's not a major issue here. However, as a rule, determinate tomatoes are smaller.
Bruce, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
So I'm really new at gardening, and I just learned that term, determinate and indeterminate tomatoes. And now you're saying that in Sacramento, and that's where we are, that the tomato plant can just keep growing. So that was a long way to get to my question, which is, can I make my tomato plant a perennial? Can I keep it in the ground all year round, or do I need to save seed? You know, so right. I'm wondering about that. So question number one, can I make my tomato plant? And for example, I like those big beef tomato plants that make that big fat tomatoes. Can I make that a perennial plant? And I'm going to leave it at that question.
In Sacramento, no. Because number one, it gets cold, and tomatoes like warm weather. So even though we don't necessarily freeze every year, they get cold, and your tomatoes are probably going to die. Number two is, yes, I think in Hawaii, possibly they become perennialized. But the reality is also they're very gangly and rangy. And if you make them perennials, well, they're just going to, if you could be so lucky as to keep on growing, they'll go all over the place. Also, shall I keep moving here?
Yeah.
Also, what'll happen is they will start to go downhill health-wise. So I don't know if you could do it here. I'm going to say no, you couldn't do it here. But the other issue is, why would you, when you can get nice, beautiful new plants every year with really no additional, in fact, a lot less effort, because the tomatoes are, you're not going to have to do a stake of them and when they get 20 feet long. But so, yeah, I would say,
Okay.
don't bother.
Well,
thinking about it.
that answers the question for me anyway.
Now, here's this person is growing plum tomatoes. If you look closely, you'll see.
Let me
these are
get in
plum
there with you.
tomatoes. They're used for cooking, although
Wait,
they taste
here
good.
it comes. Where is it?
Right here.
Where?
See my
There.
finger moving?
Yeah.
Okay, now plum tomatoes are mostly used for sauces, but they sell them as Roma tomatoes over at Sprouts and stores. Roma is a variety of plum tomato, and it's the commonly grown one that you see in all the supermarkets. But there are so many types of plum tomatoes. Again, the plum tomatoes tend to be the ones that are determinate and smaller. Go over here.
I'll follow you.
This person.
May I ask a tomato question?
You may.
My tomato plants are very healthy. They've got great growth on them. My early girl and celebrity have begun to put out fruit.
Oh, good.
But I have very few blossoms on my Ace, Champion, and Better Boy. And actually, I don't have that many flowers on the celebrity, though it's starting to fruit.
I guess if the question is why, the question, the answer might be, I don't know. But the reality is, it hasn't been super hot here yet. And even though it gets hot in the day, it does cool off the night. So it might be nothing more than it's not warm enough yet to get great flowering. It might be that, did you feed them? And did you put fertilizer down?
Not since I planted them, no.
Now here, I got a feeling people here are using a lot of compost. I just have this feeling that they have a lot of compost available here. Do they, by the way?
So compost is a good question. We'll talk about that in 1 second.
So we don't know if they have it available here.
So let me just answer that question. So right back here, you can see that there are some bins, and there's that. And then closer over here, the Natomas Garden and Arts Club is just starting a partnership with another group, and that group collects food scraps from local restaurants. And what we're going to be doing, a partnership with this other group, is using these chain link bins here as a composting opportunity. It really is. So we've got the straw out here, and we're going to have the table scraps, and there's going to be bins and bins filled with compost this time next year.
And plants love compost.
Yeah.
Compost is like a weak fertilizer, almost, you could say. It's all the decomposed products. Soil is basically compost when you think about it. It's decomposed plants, animals, obviously, rocks and things. But the tomatoes here are thriving. So if you've only fed them when you planted them, you might want to give them a little feeding. Don't put it right on the plant, put it around the base of the plant. You can just gently scratch it in, and that'll get your plants growing. I would be like a 5-10-10 or a 5-10-5. Don't use anything too high in nitrogen, because that'll make them grow really well, but you won't necessarily help promote flowering. 5 is the first. Those are NPC numbers. N is nitrogen. P is phosphorus. Is I always forget which is potassium, which is phosphorus. I think phosphorus is P and potassium is K. So phosphorus would be the middle number and potassium is the last number. Nitrogen makes the leaves grow well. Phosphorus is helpful in promoting flowering. And potassium, they say, is just for the general health and disease resistance of the plant. But so if you get a fertilizer with the middle number that's higher, that tends to promote the flowering better. And so I use something called tomato and vegetable food. It's produced by, it might be Eaton Stone or one of the other companies, and it's 5-10-10. And I'm sprinkling it right now around the base of my melons also. So I think we want to talk about staking your tomato.
So, and before we go
Yes.
to there, so Sarah, we kind of got in a variety of different topics. Did we get to the answer of your
it's a good
question?
Well, I don't know. It may be feeding them. Maybe it's possible because we've had strange weather. We haven't had that much heat yet. And that has an effect on the flowering, I know, but
Yeah, so don't
the
worry. It's
plants
only
are
May.
very healthy. You know, they're not unhealthy
Right.
plants. So, yeah.
It's only May. And remember, back in the East Coast, you know, we don't even plant our tomatoes until like maybe Memorial Day. And so it's like, you know, to have a flower like this early is pretty darn cool as far as the East Coasters would say. So I would say, don't worry about it. It should be fine. As long as your plants are healthy, then you're generally fine.
Okay.
And but it sounds like a little fertilization at this point is not a.
It's not a bad idea. If it's been a month since you planted them,
Yes.
yeah. Now, I want you to know, I only planted my tomatoes 2 weeks ago because I'm growing them all from seed, and it takes longer if you don't have a greenhouse to grow from seed than, let's just say, buying them from the store. So mine are small, but they'll be fine. So the first thing is, if you planted them 4 weeks ago, yeah, probably could do a little bit of a mild feed.
Okay. Thank you.
And I actually use a lot of liquid fertilizer when I water because I always have to supplement the water in my plants in my garden because there's dew. And I have, so I always have a bucket of water, about 35-gallon bucket of water filled with a very, very weak fertilizer. I mean, it says a 1/4 teaspoon per gallon. I'm probably using 1/8 or 1/16 of a teaspoon per gallon. But every time I hand water, which is every day, because I always have to supplement, it's getting a teeny bit of fertilizer. And so that helps them to grow well. And again, organic fertilizer is certainly better. There's different types of ways they source the nitrogen for these fertilizers. I'm not an expert. Some use urea, some use something else, and I don't know which is better, but it's something that you have to take into consideration. The source of the nitrogen does make a difference. I'm sorry about it, I don't have an answer, but that's what that is for. That and conspiracy theories. So I think
it's summertime, yeah, and the stakes are high.
Summertime and the stakes are high.
So let's stake. Let's have a little staking demonstration. Yeah, stay hydrated.
These are, you know, the only thing better than homegrown tomatoes are homegrown tomatoes that have been staked with homegrown stakes. So first of all, I have clumping bamboo. Do not ever plant running bamboo, because if you plant running bamboo, the only place you're going to be running is for the hills, because that's where the neighbors are going to send you. Because running bamboo is probably illegal to plant in many areas now. I had it in New York. I moved away. I had controlled it. The new neighbors did not control it. And my backyard, now I live in 1/3 of an acre back there, and the backyard was taken over by the bamboo in the space of 3 years. So clumping bamboo is the only one you should ever grow. I fixed these this morning. This one's a little weak, but by the way, you pay money for bamboo, and this is not, these stakes are not cheap. So if you have bamboo available somewhere in one of your neighbors, they'll be very happy to let you, I'm sure, come over and cut some, because even clumping bamboo does get big. So what we'll do is we're gonna just use the big stick.
I'm gonna just take this out of the screen there.
And I'm gonna use, I know it's not organic, but you know, everything.
What you got there?
This is just this tape that you can get from the store.
Is that sticky tape?
It's not sticky tape, it's stretchy though.
Oh.
And let's see, one of
you go find a plant that you like,
members,
and again, I'm following you.
So let's see, where did he say Councilmember Harris's section is?
So straight ahead, and we'll go over to Councilman Jeff Harris has some. There's a squash.
So the council members often all tied up in meetings. So I think we should tie up his tomato plants.
Let's tie up some tomato plants for Jeff Harris.
Now, I want to, while the camera is there, I'm going to get my mallet. I'll be
all
right.
Right. So we'll just wait here patiently. And just look at the beautiful garden. It is just a really pretty day out here in South Natomas. And want you to remember that there are some plots still available, and you can go to natomasgac.org. We have the phone number and the name of the person, Bill who?
Maynard.
Bill Maynard is the manager of this particular garden. So tell us,
Okay.
Bruce, what you're going to do.
So first of all, I'm going to put a stake towards the base of the plant. You know, notice I flipped this over. When I made the cut, I made a diagonal cut here just by accident. And on this cut, it was flat. So it's going to be easier to get into the ground if I have a diagonal cut on the bottom, just like a stake. I'm not going to go too close to the base of the plant, but close enough. Then I'm going to push this down a little bit. The soil is nice and soft, and I'm going to hammer it in. Probably. Well, this is a 6-foot stake, so I'll hammer it down a foot.
6 foot?
This was a 6-foot stake.
So it really should be tall.
Yeah, because it'll probably reach the top of the stake. The reality is that these cages are nice cages, but it's not even a cage.
But he's so little.
Yeah, I know, but my son was little, and now he's 6'2". So tomatoes are like children. They grow. Unlike children. They're edible. Now the stake didn't go in perfectly straight. I mean, that's okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter. The plant, as long as it stays sturdy.
All right, I'm going to get down here.
So first thing is, there actually is a right way and a wrong way to tie things onto stakes. There is a right way and a wrong way to tie your plants onto stakes. Now, a lot of people will just tie it on just like this.
Just like
if you look closely, I just tied the plant directly to the stake.
Okay.
And you could do that, but the problem with that is as the plant grows, it will start to pull at the tie on, and these are stretchy, so you'd be okay. But if you're using anything like a wire, sometimes you see those green spools of wire, and if you tie it on tightly to the stake, then as the plant gets thicker, and it will the plant will grow bigger than the opening on the wire, and it will cut into the plant. And it's just not healthy.
Okay.
So one of the things I learned when I used to work at the Botanical Gardens when I was a kid is you first make a tie on the plant. And I'm making it too tight so that there's an opening for growth. That means when it gets wider, when the stem gets wider, it will be able to grow still. And again, these are stretchy, but why restrict if I don't have to? And I make it nice and tight. Then I'm going to tie that looped part to like this. So what I'm doing is essentially this part is looped and it has plenty of room for growth. And now I pull it to the dot and I tie tightly there. And as a result, this plant is still tight to the stake, but it has room for growth in the loop. Now that loop was flipped, doesn't make a heck of a difference. As the plant grows, you can continue to tie to the stake, every 6 inches, every 10 inches. The other thing is that you'll notice they call them suckers. Tomatoes they like to grow. So at every leaf axil, and here's a leaf axil, there's a little bitty new branch forming.
Yeah.
All plants do this, by the way. There's nothing special to tomatoes. But some people say you should remove the suckers. Why should you remove the suckers? I'm not sure, because the suckers are going to flower and give you more tomatoes. Some people say, well, you'll get fewer tomatoes and they'll be bigger. The only reason, in my opinion, to remove the suckers is if you're a very limited space, then...
And which one is the sucker?
Here's one here. And frankly, here's a big one. Here's a branch coming right out of the leaf. So this is a big sucker.
So that whole thing there.
Yeah, they call them suckers.
Okay.
There's one down here. You don't have to remove them. I mean, caged tomatoes, they don't remove them. For steak tomatoes, it might be a little easier to keep the plant controlled. Or what you can do is, as the sucker gets big, you can tie it onto the stake. You could add another stake if you want. Here's one over here. I guess I could. I'm not going to restake this one, but let's just say there's two big ones here because it branched right at the middle. You could just tie both of these to the stake.
And it's just perfectly fine as a bifurcated tomato plant.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want that with a tree, but with a tomato plant, it doesn't matter. There is some question, you know, if you put them really close together, will that prevent air circulation, promote disease? Well, if you look at the plants in the cages, those are really close together. If it's going to promote disease, it's going to promote disease in either case. So the answer is healthy plants are less prone to disease. So yeah, I think staking is fine. I like to potchkey around the garden, and so I sort of enjoy coming out with my cup of tea, staking a few, having a sip of my tea, staking another one. Since I'm growing the dwarf tomatoes, I stake them because they're too small to bother with a cage. So I think that's it for tomatoes today. Do we have any other questions from the audience? I have a question. How come my zucchinis aren't making fruit? Well, you guys,
that's a most common question, isn't it?
Zucchinis have male flowers and female flowers. In order to pollinate, you need the male pollen to hit the female flower. If you do not have a lot of bees in the garden, you may have to resort to playing the bee. And what you simply do is you'll see the male flowers have a single little pokey spike in the middle. That's actually the pollen. That's the anther. And then the female has a little curlicue in the base of the flower. And behind the flower, there's a little miniature zucchini. That's the ovary of the flower. So you just get your finger, you go into the male flower, touch the center, you'll get the pollen on your finger, it'll be orange, and then go into the female flower and just smush it around a little bit on the little the stigma, which is the little curly part. Did I say this? The pistil, which is the little curly part. And then you will get pollination and you'll get zucchinis. That's the number one reason why melons don't pollinate, why cucumbers don't pollinate. Anything in the squash family, there are male flowers and female flowers. And just as a closing remark, seedless watermelons need pollination. That's why when you buy seedless watermelon varieties, you must plant a pollinating variety with it, or you will not get watermelon.
And that would be so disappointing.
Yeah, because watermelon take lots of space. And if you get all that space and devote it to watermelons and you don't get watermelons, you are going to be in the doghouse when it comes to my partner, because she loves watermelons. So that's the lesson today. If you want your marriage to be successful, make sure you pollinate your watermelons.
Well, thank you, Bruce. Thank you for coming out to the Ninos Community Garden today.
Great.
And everyone else, if you want more information about gardening, please visit natomasgac.org and ask us a question, send us a comment. We'll look forward to hearing from you.
And I have to plug Sacbo. I'm not just a plant lover, I'm also the co-founder of the Sacramento Botanical Gardens. We are building a botanical garden in Sacramento, and we want all our plant-loving friends to make sure to go to sacbo.org to see what we're up to, and to write your council members and tell them, or email, and tell them how much you want a botanical garden. Sacbo will tell you what it's going to be like, sacbo.org, and you'll get a good idea of our plan. It's very significant that our city does not have a botanical garden.
And we should.
And we should.
Would you give the address again, the email?
Sure. SACBO, sacbo.org. And the email is easy. It's info@sacbo.org.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Tell your friends.
Tell your friends and even your enemies.
Because once you tell your enemies about a beautiful garden, they won't be your enemies anymore.
True. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Bye, everyone.